Hello guys. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the new policy that's set forward from the VA. Now, recent advocacy groups have been pressuring the VA, which is Veterans Affairs, which handles medical for veterans, to include as part of medical coverage gender reassignment surgery. Now, I understand that this might be a way for people in the trans community to get their surgery taken care of. They join the military and they serve our armed forces. I definitely think that that would be a way to grant access to that type of medical procedure. And while I understand it, and I think that it does need to be covered by more insurances, the VA system is too congested to allow this type of procedure to be covered. Gender reassignment, as you know, you have to stay in the hospital, and it's hard for our veterans now to get a bed for things like PTSD, TBIs, which are, the traumatic brain injuries, and other resources like that. A lot of times, many amputees can't get the medical care they need. They come back and they're expecting their country to help them after they've served, which I do believe that we do owe our veterans this. So, while I understand gender reassignment is a medical condition, gender identity disorder is a medical condition, and it does need to be covered by more insurances. I don't think the VA should do this, only because they're so congested. People have written stories about how they were suffering from PTSD and called their therapist or called medical professionals and were on hold for hours, and it resulted in tragedy. Lives are being torn apart by our men and women coming back, missing limbs, missing, peace, missing just a whole bunch, and it's ruining families by our soldiers taking their lives because no one seems to have the time because it's just so congested. And I think adding this would make the problem worse. Now, this being said, another topic I'd like to jump into that affects both transgender individuals and people with disabilities is the whole restroom issue. Okay, certain places have stated that you can now only go into the restroom that your gender allowed at birth. Now, I understand there's gender phobia and there's transphobia and there's all sorts of things happening with this, and I understand. However, for people with disabilities, this has created a block where it's helped transgendered individuals or stopped them. It's created a block. This was not an issue before, but for some individuals that need help or assistance in the restroom, they now cannot get it. For instance, if you have a 40-year-old man who has his mother assist him in the restroom, or a nurse who happens to be a female, they cannot go into the same restroom. Now, people think, well, a 40-year-old man shouldn't be there. Okay, but what option does this individual have? You have a huge population of people with autism who need to be supervised while in the restroom, or they can't be left alone while their parents are in the restroom or caregivers in the restroom. And now this individual doesn't have an avenue to go. And it's putting a lot of stress on caretakers and people with disabilities alike. Okay? Now, while people are so concerned about, which door to go through, most restrooms are not accessible to people with disabilities. The stalls that are, quote, bigger are not necessarily big enough for a wheelchair and a caretaker, or someone with a wheelchair to move freely. The changing stations are for children that are under a certain weight. What about individuals who need changing or need assistance that are above that weight? There's not that many changing stations that do this. This is an easy fix, and instead of doing these easy fixes, we're concerned about who's looking at who in the restroom. While I understand that concern, you have people having to go lay down on the floor because there's not a changing station in every restroom that can accommodate. Now, I think that's a much bigger issue, having people having to lay down on the floor that probably has urine and fecal matter on the floor. Would you like to lay your child down there? We talk about rights in this country, and while everyone has rights, it's obvious that not everyone's seen equally. So, before we start with the my rights, my rants for the trans community, let's make it all inclusive. Thank you.